So, guys, welcome to the Friday evening talk. Um, it's Saturday here in Thailand, and that today we're talking about basically it's phrased as the meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? What's the point? Okay, that in fact, um, humanity has tried to answer this question and get some really, really bizarre kinds of things. And in fact, that question, what's the meaning of life or what's the point, is the basic source of all religions. And that basically what the religions are about is the fulfillment of what we all experience in childhood, and that is the loss of a genuine authority. That when everybody is born, we see mommy and daddy as the authority and we look up to them. And then by the time that we're a certain age, we begin to recognize that we need better authorities than these, that these people are not up to my scratch. And so we just trying to decide then, well, what is a good authority? What is the ultimate authority for my life? In other words, when I'm talking about what's the meaning of life, what I'm talking about is some authority figure that's going to approve of my answer to what is the meaning of life. That we're actually seeking approval when we're asking the question of what's the meaning of life, because if we can figure out what the meaning of life is, then we can go do what we're told to do. It's almost like a game to where you've got to go do something, but you've got to do it either in the right way or you've got to figure out what it is to do. An example of that is there are certain kind of games that are invented to be played, and part of the process of learning the game is to learn all the rules. And sometimes some of the games, the point of the game is to learn what the rules of the game are. Because if you learn the rules of the game and play the game correctly, then you can win the game every time. But if you don't know what the rules are, you're going to keep making mistakes. Okay, so this quality of the meaning of life means then that what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what the rules are, the rules to the game of life. And we wind up with a bunch of rules. I have never bothered to count up all the rules that I've learned, but it's got to be in the hundreds of thousands. I mean, just learning the rules of English language is tens of thousands of rules. Hello, Alex. Welcome.
Hey everyone, I'm driving in the car, so no video tonight, but good to see all your smiling faces.
Okay. Well, we have just started talking about what is the meaning of life and what's the point to it all. And
Awesome.
that um, it's actually wrapped up with uh, the childhood fantasies that we all have, and that childhood fantasy that we have is that we're not good enough. Every child is born a victim. Every one of us cannot feed ourselves. We can't dress in battle armor at the age of 1 day and go off and win a war. We can't do that. We're complete victims. We have to be nurtured and taken care of. And so that getting taken care of by mommy and daddy becomes familiar. I mean, we learn a lot by the time that we're 3 years old. We become very curious. We learn to play with our toys. We actually get what you could call some gumption. That, in fact, it's quite common in psychology to talk about the terrible twos. When a child is 2 years old, he learns the most favorite word that he will use for the rest of his life, and that word is no. We learn to say no to our authorities. But the problem with that is that then the authorities don't like when we say no to them. And that's the very first thing that we learn. Why is that? Is because it's the development of the ego, or the child's personality. That in fact, when a baby is a really, really tender infant, that baby cannot tell or distinguish the difference between himself and his mommy. It's only later when we begin to figure out that we are not our mommy, that we're separate from her. And so we get into this relationship of a push-pull. I want to be close to mommy. I want to be myself. I want to be close to mommy. I want to be myself. I want to then, as later, it gets to the point, I want to obey authority and play the game and get the rules right. And also, I want to be separate. I want to rebel. I want to be my own person. And so every one of us is caught in this dichotomy, but that dichotomy itself actually keeps us victims, because we're stuck in a situation that we don't quite know how to get out of. And in fact, most kids don't even know about this dilemma that they're caught in. That it's only later when we can look back in retrospect and see that every child is caught in this dilemma about, are we going to remain a tender infant, or are we going to grow up and be our own person? And how is that process handled? And guess what? In our society, we don't handle that well. We have one generation after another generation after another generation of failures at this one particular point. And so our relationship with our authority figures becomes problematic for everyone. Are we going to follow the rules? Or are we going to be able to please the authority and get along? But if I do that, I'll lose myself. I'll lose my own sense of identity. Now, that loss of the sense of identity actually is something that we all experience because it's instinctual. It's called the self-preservation instinct. That in fact, if I merge with the authority, that's the same as my own ego death. And so we want to maintain this dichotomy, a back and forth between am I me, or am I a part of something bigger than myself. Now, ultimately, if we're correct, we will, in fact, get over that self-identification, that selfishness, and merge then with the greater authority. But there's some dangers along the way, and one of them is that we misunderstand what the real ultimately authority really is. In other words, we may make the mistake that, oh, my ultimate authority is the mob boss, or the general, or the preacher, or something like that. Or we can make even a bigger mistake by doing it with a magical thing like a religion or a god. But along the way, in fact, that question comes up, what's the meaning of life, or what's the point to it all, is another way of asking that question, how do I find my place? How do I fit in? Because if I can find out the answer to what is the meaning of life, or what is the point about it, then I can do that, and then I'll be okay. So, where does this fit in then with the teaching of the Buddha is that we have to recognize that this dichotomy actually exists. If we can see that we have all of these rites, rules, rituals, and everything like that that we built up from childhood winds up getting in the way, because the people who gave us all of these rites, rules, rituals, and everything like that did not have this issue ever figured out for themselves. So the rules themselves are all hit and miss. And that means that each one of us needs to reevaluate all the rules that we've had to see if, in fact, do they hit or do they miss? because a lot of the rules that we keep don't function the way that we thought that they would, or that we were told they would. That things have what we call um, uh, collateral damage or unintended consequences. Now, the Buddha talks about this in the sense of the law of karma, and we should touch upon that for a little bit, because there is a law of karma that actually does exist, but it's not the law of karma that's taught. The law of karma that actually exists is the same thing as talking about cause and effect relationships. This causes that, and then that causes this other thing. What was that, Scott? You wrote something? Doesn't stay up very long. So anyway, this law of karma is actually a cause of, is the point of, uh, it happens immediately. If you drink poison, you'll get sick and die. If you eat food, you'll get nourished. So this is the point of it, is that good actions give good results and bad actions give bad results only in the context of cause and effect. But the magical thinking that's brought in from religions, that they add a tiny little phrase to that. And that tiny little phrase is no matter what. That if you do a good action, you're going to get a good result from that no matter what, no matter how long it takes. If you do a bad action, you're going to get a bad result no matter what, ever how long it takes. Well, that ever how long it takes actually requires a store and forward mechanism. Okay, we use store and forward mechanisms with computers and software all the time. An example of that would be that we sing a song, we record it, and store that, and then later we play it back later. Another one more germane here is the store and forward mechanism of a switch. That two different computers can be talking at two different rates of speed, one at 100 megabits and the other one at 1 gigabit. How can the switch communicate with this is because he stores that message and then forwards it at the right speed to the next device. So the slow speed machine, they have to store the whole message and then send it out at high speed. And the same thing with the high speed message, they have to store that and then forward it at the low speed. Now here's the question. How is that going to happen with karma so that it has a long-term benefit? The only thing that we know about is store and forward is about evidence and human memory. That the example that I would have would be that a kid who was 14 years old was standing with his dad when his dad gets shot. When the kid is 21, he gets a gun and shoots the guy who shot his dad. Now, did that guy get killed because of the circumstances? Did he get killed because of what the kid was thinking? Did he get killed because of the karma machine? In other words, if that 14-year-old boy did not know who killed his dad, then we don't have any evidence for what's going on here. But because we know that that kid probably remembered that guy, he planned on that. He got that gun in advance. So he did all of that kind of stuff himself. And we can't blame it on the guy's karma. But we can, in a way, because we say that, oh, he got shot because he killed that boy's dad. But there's been too many causes and effects. The boy could have died in between. The other guy could have died in between. He could have moved to another city. All kinds of things. In other words, what we're talking about is a sequence of events that over a course of time kept things going in a certain direction, but each one of those was a cause and effect right there in that moment, and things rolled along. Another example of that I've heard is that many people have the idea that the Holocaust was the cause and condition for the nation of Israel. Have you ever heard anything like that? That if Hitler hadn't done the Holocaust, there would never have been the nation of Israel. Well, guess what? We know far too many facts to make that statement. We know, in fact, that the Israeli government got invented because of stuff that was happening right after World War II, especially with the breakup of the British Empire. And so we could say that the British had more to do with the formation of Israel and that Hitler had very little to do with it. But when we like the idea of a store and forward mechanism that builds our karma, then that will give us the possibility of rebirth, reincarnation, and all of that kind of stuff, because we have that store and forward mechanism that doesn't really exist. It only exists as an idea or a concept, but real karma, real action, always has an immediate result. That I think that Newton was talking about that in the 3 laws of thermodynamics, that an action gives a reaction. But when Newton says that it's an equal and opposite reaction, that's only true in certain cases, like the kick of a gun is opposite to the projectile of the bullet. Except that it's also possible for that gun to explode as a reaction to that bullet. And believe me, the explosion of the gun is not an actual opposite. And so when we understand that everything has to do with an immediate cause and effect, and everything like that is just a very little series of causes and effects over time, that takes a lot of the magic out of it. And it also takes the possibility of meaning out of it, because almost always the meaning of life has to do with a long-term process. That we're looking for the meaning of life as if there is a meaning of life, a big, big meaning, or a big, big point. And the fact is that no, everything is immediate. Cause and effect, one after another. Now, this actually aids us in our practice quite a bit, because we only have to think about what actions we're taking right now and what effects they're having right now in the next mind moment or the next second or two. That we narrow our focus. That because of our society and religions, we tend to get a long time frame of the future, very long, the past, very long, to where the reality of the past is that it's only what you remember, and your memory is not very good. Everybody has a laptop or a cell phone, and those cell phones and laptops are a whole lot better at remembering things like movies and whatnot, and humans are not very good at it. Our memories are not good. And because of that, we think that we can remember things to where, in fact, we don't. And that oftentimes what we remember is more of the feeling than the actual events that happened. So when we're little kids and we write on the wall, and mom comes in and says, "Oh, you're not supposed to write on the wall," then that fussing that she does is what we remember. If mom had come in and says, "Oh, that's a beautiful drawing, you've got something nice there," then it may have not had a memory at all. In fact, the child who was drawing on the wall probably doesn't remember drawing on the wall at all. What he remembers is getting fussed at. And so that means then that not only is our memory spotty in the beginning, but it also is focused. And what is it focused on? It's focused on, in fact, self-preservation. It's focused on danger. And so we will remember the dangers. An example of that is somebody that hurts you, you'll remember him But the people who pass down the street, I mean, how many times have you gone down the street and you pass by hundreds of people and you don't remember them? But if somebody hurts you, you'll remember that. So this is the way that the mind works. It works this way. If we can understand that, then we can stop counting on memory so much that the old deep past is not worth thinking about much. We're not, in fact, going to find the meaning of life in the past. And similar with the future, because nobody knows what the future is going to be. We can see tendencies, we can see cycles. If we see this cycle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, then we can pretty well count on that cycle is going to happen a sixth time until something gets in the way and then that cycle is diverted. So we can see cycles of things, but we don't really know the details of it. The example that I use is that you can see the direction that a gun is pointing, but you do not know where the bullet's going to land, nor do you know when it's going to be fired or anything else like that. All you know is the general direction that things are going. But that's quite valuable, because that means that if we're heading in the wrong direction, at least we can see that and change the direction that we're going so that we got a better chance of hitting it correctly. But the point is that we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Well, if we don't know what's happening in the future and our past is so spotty, the best thing that we can pay attention to then is the here, right now, the actions that we're doing right now, because they're going to have immediate results. And so this is the beginning of the practice, Zachary. The beginning of the practice is to recognize that all of the good stuff that's going to happen is always going to happen in the here now. And it goes that way. With the thoughts and the feelings that we have now will put us in the gear or going in the direction of making those statements out loud. If I have a thought and I have a thought and I have a thought, I'll eventually speak it out to someone out loud. If I say something out loud, then more than likely I'm going to be taking an action on it. An example of that is on social media, that the people who give threats to some famous person are the ones who are most likely going to follow through with those threats. That's funny. If you don't ever threaten anyone, then you'll probably never hurt them, because you never had the thought of threatening them and hurting them, and so the action will probably not happen. And so with our speech comes action, and from our actions become habits, and then our habits become our destiny. And so destinies do exist, but they exist only in the sense of repeating these habits over and over again. So how does that happen then, that we can change our destiny? Is by changing what we're thinking right here, right now. And we do that over and over and over again, to change what we're thinking, to change it from an unwholesome thought to a wholesome thought. Or in a way, when we're having unwholesome thoughts, the question at the bottom of all of those unwholesome thoughts is that question that Nick asked, and that is, what's the point? What's the meaning of life? We're actually out there trying to answer that question over and over and over again. What's the point of all of this? And the answer to that is, right now, the point is that I'm going to enjoy this moment. I can change it from being unhappy and dissatisfied and wanting to find a point and trying to get this thing satisfied, and throw that out. That in fact, the question that we're asking of what's the point is another way of talking about making problems. We're saying, if this, what is the point, has then the quality of, let's go do something to find the point or to fix the point. Now, almost always this comes from underlying feelings, a feeling of tension, fear, anxiety, tensions, and we carry these around. and that there are certain chemicals in the body that, in fact, I just also read recently about cortisol. Now, cortisol is something that the adrenaline pumps out as well as adrenaline itself, except that adrenaline breaks down very, very quickly. It's designed for high energy. But there is another drug in there, or molecule called cortisol, that actually is a way of getting us ready for fighting. Well, they have now done the research and found out that when people drink alcohol on a regular basis, not much, just one or two drinks a day, over and over and over again, the alcohol itself turns on the cortisol. It actually helps manufacture the cortisol. If you've seen that, you can see why when we get a buzz on, that means that we're kind of getting ready for something. They also know that this cortisol builds up over time and that old people wind up being full of cortisol. They're full of anxious tensions, uh, wanting to get ready for. In other words, they're still now agitated into looking for what's the meaning of life? What's the point? Where we go from here? That kind of question then um, has physical components. And so people who drink alcohol wind up wanting to know that answer even more than people who don't drink at all. That when people don't drink at all, they don't have much cortisol in their system and they can be relaxed even into old age. And so, what can we do then that's going to prevent these kinds of molecules, these kind of drugs, chemicals that are in the system? We can actually begin to control those at a moment by moment basis. So, if you're having angry thoughts, you're going to have adrenaline and cortisol in the system. And when you're having sweet, loving, kind thoughts, then those chemicals are not going to be there. We're going to more likely have things in the brain like dopamine, serotonin, that kind of stuff. And that we do have a choice about the kind of thoughts that we're going to have. This is what the real teaching of the Buddha is that there's some kind of thoughts take us down and other kind of thoughts take us up. And it's our choice. We can either have dukkha, which is being dissatisfied, or we can be satisfied instead. So if we have the kind of thoughts that give us uh, dissatisfaction, like the answer of the question is, well, what's the point? What's the meaning of life? This is kind of an agitating question. But if we have the kind of thoughts of everything is okay, everything is fine, we don't need to get the point right now that everything is already okay. Then we're going to have thoughts and feelings and body chemistry that is much more healthy, more wholesome. So, Alex, you got a question?
Yeah. Hey, Dhammarato. So I haven't really talked about this with anybody here or you, Dhammarato, but I think it might tie into what we're talking about. For the past like 6 months or to a year, I've noticed. I don't know if it's that I've always done this because I've had ADHD since I was a young kid. At least that's what my mom told me. You know, I was diagnosed, I was put on medication, had some seizures, and came off of it. But so I haven't taken any medication since. But what I've noticed in the past year is an issue with word finding. I'll find I'll find that I'm in a conversation with someone and I won't know, like I'll know what to say. I'll know exactly what I want to say, but I can't seem to say it or can't seem to find the words to say it. And this can be very disorienting because I see what to say very clearly, but I can't actually formulate the words. And I know that, you know, my dad, he had Alzheimer's. I'll be honest with you. I'm going to see a doctor on Monday to get this investigated and see if I may have early onset Alzheimer's, if I have some kind of speech disorder, or even aphasia, which I know might sound absolutely ridiculous, but aphasia is caused by a stroke or brain tumor. Now, I'm not panicking, okay, so that's good, but I am a little nervous, a little scared in this moment. I know that I can tell myself everything is fine and everything is fine, but that is a little concerning to me. And I know you were talking about destiny and our habits and how that over and over and over again, doing certain things lead to a particular result.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was curious if you had any insight for me based on the issue of word finding, of difficulties with word finding or knowing what to say.
Okay. Let me say it like this, is that you actually are correct. You have been telling yourself this. Oh, my dad had Alzheimer's. Maybe I've got early Alzheimer's. You've had problems with finding the right word. Well, guess what? I do too. Does anybody here not have any trouble finding just the right words? Raise your hand if you're perfect with your speech. Or better still, what Alex is talking about, have you guys had that too? I have. I know exactly what he's talking about. But the difference
Okay.
is, Alex, is that I'm not finding it as a problem or trying to solve it in the sense of what's the point. So basically, the kind of thoughts that you're having when you find the word that you're looking for hard to find, you think that there's something wrong with you. And you've been talking to yourself about what's wrong with you for many, many years. And now perhaps the time is for you to start paying attention to what you've got going. Because even though I do have trouble with finding the right word, I still wind up being able to communicate. And that's what the point is. Finding the right word all the time is not necessarily the point. So here's where I would go with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so beginning to change your thoughts from I've made a mistake into that's what life is like. Humans, by the way, are not as good as they think that they are. We actually are, as humans, are pretty well hyped up. I mean, look at the history of humanity with that. Like we are special because we are God's gift to the world, right? That God made humans special. Here's an item for you. You know about dogs? Dogs in the sense of man's best friend? They have done some research now, and they have found that baboons feed the dogs in the wild, and the dogs hang out with the baboons. And so the baboons use the dogs for alert. They bark, the dogs will bark in danger and whatnot, and the dogs become man's best friend, except that it's, in this case, these are not man, these are baboons. I would say, though, with this kind of research, that we could go so far as to say that the dog has been man's best friend before man actually existed.
Wow.
That what made us human was partially our relationship with the dogs. There's another quality with that, and that is that fire. If we have cooked food, then we don't have to work so hard at chewing our food. Our food is digested. We get better energy out of it. And so the point is that gorillas, apes, baboons could have, in fact, probably did discover fire in the sense of how to control it. And they were the ones who cooked their food so that now they don't need those great big jaw muscles on the side of their face with those great big jaws to chew raw meat. that we cook the meat. And cooking food is what made us humans. Cooking food is not necessarily a human trait. Animals were doing the cooking before we became human. That humanity is the result of baboons domesticating animals, domesticating dogs, domesticating fire, and the domestications is what made us human. But we're still animals. We're still,
Hey, Dhammarato.
yes.
Yes, I just wanted to like say I understand what you're saying. That reason why I'm having, well, not the reason necessarily. The problem is that I may be trying to find a reason, or I may be thinking something is wrong with me as to why I'm having the word finding difficulties. Totally understand
Yes.
that. Totally
Uh-huh.
understand that. But being a man of science yourself, I'm sure that you haven't also completely turned away from other possible medical explanations for why this occurs,
Well,
right?
I would say real illness, when someone is really sick with a disease, and that disease can either be born from a microbe or it can be from a defect. But Alex, I've known you for quite a long time, and you do not look defective to me in any way like this. That the defects that you're finding are unconsequential. The best that this doctor can do for you is charge you $500 and tell you you're okay. Because if you pay him that money, you'll believe him. Me, you don't pay, so you won't believe me.
Oh,
But
hey, I
I,
appreciate that. I'm with you on that. It's just you, you can't help but be curious when you have a, like, not trying to play the pity card here, but when you have a father that had Alzheimer's or dementia, it's like, it's scary. You know, it is a hereditary and genetic thing. And if I did have it, I would want to know now rather than, say, oh, no worries, just be happy now, than find out in my 60s that I have it and I haven't done everything I could to prevent its progression. You know?
okay. Yes, I do know. Now, I do also know, based upon my own studies in psychology, let's go back into the way last century, back into the 1800s, that way back when people who had psychological problems were really badly mistreated like they are today. But there was a time from the 1880s through the 1960s where we were better with working with people. Now, here's the point. We have known about it. What we I've actually talked to people who know what they're talking about in the sense of how the law looks at it. That there's actually various kinds of Alzheimer's and whatnot. They've got that done. But here's the point. General
Okay.
populations have been using language. We've known about this because we had the language for it. We called it senility. We called it senile. Then we called it for 100 years, we called it dementia. Now we've got a new word for it called Alzheimer's. Okay. But the point is that in this research, they have not been able to prove one way or the other. There's no good evidence that it's hereditary. They don't know what the cause of Alzheimer's is. There's a whole lot of research going on, but they have more or less uh, given away
There is.
with the point about it being hereditary. Here's another point, and that is that there's no real clear evidence that even being overweight is hereditary. Well, what we do know is the diet of the mother, she will give that diet to her children.
Mm,
And so it's passed on that way. And that Alzheimer's, they've also done some research to find out that some of the chemicals that we're using, that in fact, one of the ones that they're really investigating is aspartame. Now, aspartame is used as a sweetener And that there's a lot of evidence that people who drink Diet Cokes and Tabs and that kind of stuff for years and years and years are the ones that are more likely to get Alzheimer's. So if your dad has gotten and died from Alzheimer's, that does not mean that you are predisposed to Alzheimer's. That it has more to do
Yeah.
with diet than it does heredity.
Yeah. No, you're right. I get that. I saw that in my research as well. I'm also just more concerned about things like aphasia and just a general speech disorder. You know, aphasia can be caused from a stroke or from a brain tumor. You know, you can have a brain tumor and you might not even know it.
I don't know, don't hear a voice defect with you, Alex.
Wait, whoa, what'd you say?
I said I do not detect a voice defect in your speech.
All right, well, I appreciate that, Dhammarato. Thank you.
You're kind of making stuff up, and that in fact the stuff that you're making up right now is a very, very clear sign of how we all make stuff up. We're trying to get it fixed. We don't want to accept that we are human and that
Yeah.
humans are, let us say, not up to the scratch that humans think that we should be up to. That
Well,
we're
here's the
all
thing.
looking. Mm-hmm.
I work with a bunch of salespeople, right? And
Uh-huh.
they don't seem to have this issue
They
that
don't
I've
seem to
experienced.
talk about it. You don't have it. You're just talking about it.
That's true. But what I'm saying is something like my manager, he's very articulate. He's very articulate. He can articulate himself very well.
Okay.
And I think he can articulate himself better than I can.
Well,
Um,
I don't know your boss, but you can articulate yourself pretty well. Does anybody have any trouble understanding exactly what Alex is saying? No, we all get it. We can understand you,
you
but
guys
it
are
would be
biased, but
you you would be very well advised, Alex, to not compare yourself with the boss. That, yeah, so what if he's articulate? Let him be articulate, and you could be Alex, and Alex is okay.
all right, all right. Thank you, thank you.
That in fact what we're talking about here with this is just one of the many thousands of examples of how we actually create our own problems. Here you are, Alex, creating a problem for yourself that really doesn't exist. And we all do that. That we feel bad, and now we're looking for a reason to justify that, and so we're looking for a problem. Going back to Nick's original question, we're looking for what's the point. How could we get things straightened out? How in fact can we get the pat on the head from the authority figure that we've invented in our mind? And here you are saying, oh, if I was articulate as the boss would recognize me as articulate and he would pat me on the head. More than likely, that's not going to happen. More than likely, the boss is quite happy that he's more articulate than you are. And if you became as articulate as he is, then he's going to start competing with you for who's the most articulate. So let's not compare ourselves with others. This is such an important point about finding the meaning of life. Is the meaning of life actually is that you've got a choice. That's the real meaning of life, is that you've got a choice. And you can have a choice to either feel good or find a problem to solve and then feel good. Those are our choices. We either have the choice to feel good immediately, right here, right now, by remembering to, or we can find some problem to solve that problem, and then we can feel good. Now, that second method of finding a problem, solving that problem, and feeling good is the way that our society works. We don't have a society that's already comfortable and happy the way that they are. always looking for improvements. We're always looking for a change. We're always looking for a secret ingredient. We're always looking for the point. And the real point is there is no point except what you make of it. And we have that choice to make the points for ourselves. We can make whatever point that we want to make. So if you want to be a musician, then fine, practice music. Enjoy the music that you're playing. But if you can play a song, then perhaps we want to play a second song and then a third song. And now we want to play really, really difficult music. And someplace along the way, we go out of our league. That there has been music written specifically to make sure that none of the pianists around could play it. I've heard stories in music from that a long time, and in fact, the Greg's Piano Concerto was one of those kind of pieces of music that Greg wrote that thing because he wanted to make sure nobody could play it. And yet Franz Liszt did. He was up to it. So here's the point then, is that there's no point. Or a better thing to do, let's just talk about it. We did this right before we started the conversation. Is that if we say that there is no point, then people will become depressed. That's not a good solution to the problem, um, because we are raised in a culture that requires us to find a point. And if we hear, oh, ultimately there's no point to anything, then that will put us, well, what am I going to do now if there's no point? We've got to find the meaning of life. And so it's a multi-stage process. Ultimately, that's true, but for the beginning practitioner, we are actually going to find a point. This is what the Buddha is talking about when we go from dukkha to dukkha nirodha. Is that we come to the position of making our own point. We become satisfied. That's the point. We become safe and secure. That's the point. We start to feel good. That's the point. And when we begin to do that and feel good, now we have the skills that we need so that we can, in fact, come to the conclusion that there really is no point. But now we've got the skills that we need to handle that. What are the skills? Wisdom, joy, satisfaction. These are all skills that we have to develop along the way. So in a way, Nick, we could say that what the point is skill development. So that we can eventually get all the skills that we need so that we can handle the fact that there is no point after all. And then there's another way of looking at it, and that is the point is not to find what the point is. The point is to enjoy the looking. Or another way of saying it, to begin to enjoy being alive. That being alive is in fact quite remarkable. Baboons do it, dogs do it, humans do it. Baboons do it in the baboon way, and the dogs do it in the dog's way, and they're quite okay with that. But humans, we do it in the human way, and now we're all dissatisfied with the humans because we compare ourselves and say, oh, we're better than baboons, oh, we're better than the dogs. That must mean that now we're the best. And no, we're not. If anything, the laptop is better than the human. I mean, how often does your laptop get pissed off at you?
Dhammarato, I hear two things. I hear two things when you talk like this. I hear one, I hear this is it. And it's so hard to understand that this is it if we're not able to get into that calm place first, that tranquility,
Mm-hmm.
to let that wisdom come through. Because when we see that this is it can be really fucking scary if we
Yes.
don't know that this is it. And so
Yeah.
once we realize that, it's a lot easier to understand that maybe when we calm it down, when we slow it down, we can really take a look at what is here right now, and we can see that every day is a journey and the journey is home.
Hmm.
Mm.
Have any of you ever heard of Flip Wilson?
Mm.
Flip Wilson died in his 90s very happily. In the 1960s, he had a show on television. He was he was very strange when I tell you about it. Number one, in the 1960s, and he was black, and he had his own show. Number two, and the bigger point was, is he was also a cross dresser, and that he would dress up in women's clothing and have all kinds of things to say, and he was quite funny. He lived a good life. But the reason that I'm mentioning him is because he had a particular saying that was quite funny. What you see is what you get. What you see is what you get. And this is what you're seeing is Flip Wilson in all his outrageousness, and that's it. Now, another way of saying it is that what is real is what we see with our eyes, not with our
Mhm.
mind. But what we see is real. And what we see is real is not what we want. What we see, what is real, is what we get, not what we want. That is the wanting that we don't get. And the Buddha was quite big on this with the second noble truth, is that we ignorantly want things. And the wise way to do it is to want the things that we can have. We can, in fact, have what's real because here it is. And what we want is something that's not real. It's something that we made up. It's our ideas about things. Now, if we were, in fact, having a seminar about inventors, then we could go off in the direction of inventing things because everything that starts in the mind. Every invention is a mental object before it becomes real. And so the mind is the forerunner. But in this practice, what we're looking at is, in fact, is coming into tune or into harmony, not trying to invent something that we think if I invent that, I'll be happy. Or in fact, no, if you invent that, you won't be happy. Then in fact, Edison had the point that invention is only 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. So there's a lot of dukkha going on to get your idea into reality. Elon Musk mentions it in the sense of prototypes are easy, production is hard. So with this, we can recognize that, well, why then do we keep making the point that we've got to take our ideas, our inventions, and turn them into reality with all the work that it takes, and we're going to get very little value out of that? I mean, I can imagine that humans, before we had cities, some of us were mostly miserable and some of us were happy. Now that we've got cities, now that we've got transportation, now that we've got cell phones, that in fact you can imagine that way long ago before cell phones, people carried a dagger, they carried a pistol. Now we carry cell phones for protection, and we would be lost without our cell phones. So all of these things that we've invented out of all of this time really hasn't helped us to feel better at all. We still make up problems, thinking that there's a solution to the problem and that I'll feel good if I find the solution to the problem. That's why we go around asking that question, what's the point? In other words, what can I do? What can I make so that I'll eventually feel good? I'll feel satisfied. But we know that that's not true. We have a phrase, it's called a concrete jungle. I mean, we came out of the jungle because it was dangerous, and here we build cities, and the cities are still dangerous. It's still a jungle. That in fact, A lot of people will have a cell phone and they really, really like it. It's very secure. They can do this, that, and the other thing to it. And then the battery runs down. And now we feel bad, especially if we don't have any way of charging it. Or maybe the cell phone gets dropped into the toilet while it was on, and now it spits and sparks and whatnot like that, and it's no longer a cell phone. And now we feel bad. So we had it, and then we lost it. And so uh, having material possessions is instinctual. We want to communicate things because we can use those things for protection, for self preservation, because we think that the point is to remain alive. Right? Guess what? The point is not to remain alive. If there's any point to it, the point is to enjoy being alive when we are alive. Can you remember that you're alive? If you can remember that you're alive, then you can enjoy being alive. Here we are as a society trying to preserve life. We've got hospitals, we've got medicine, and all of that stuff to make the life long, while so many people are not enjoying that long life. I would rather have a short life that was well lived and happy than a long, miserable life. And so, Alex, back to your question is that if you can start to enjoy the fact that you can't find the right word, that you can enjoy that your boss is articulate, then your life is going to be much more happy. That we can accept the things the way that they are. Back to Cliff Wilson, what you see is what you get. Can you be happy with what's real? Why do we have to have something that's not real in order to be happy? Because the likelihood of getting something that's not real is very low. And so our success is going to be very low because of the attitude that we can only be successful with something that we don't have. And so practicing in the way of the Anapanasati is the practicing of being able to change those thoughts of, well, what if this and what if that, and maybe I am not articulate, and my boss is very articulate, and my dad died of Alzheimer's, and all of that kind of stuff. Alex, a better way of doing it is, wow, at least I'm still alive. At
Yeah, for
least
sure.
I'm still alive. I can at least breathe right now and be happy right now.
Yeah.
That's another way of looking at it is that death itself is what brings meaning to life. What would it be like if you were going to live forever and ever and ever? You have skydived all of the places, you have climbed every mountain, you have gone to the bottom of the Mariana Trench in a school bus, and you've done everything else that you need to do, and now you're 700 years old. What's next? What kind of life would that be?
I think
Because
it'd be pretty great. I would enjoy it. I'll go outside and take a walk. That'll be more interesting than diving all the way down to the Mariana Trench in a school bus. I'll
well,
just go take a walk.
well, the question is,
He's all right for the trap.
no matter how long you live, can you enjoy going on that walk? Or are you on that walk thinking about what am I going to do next?
I love it. Yes. Enjoy being alive while on the walk.
Right. Enjoy being alive right now. That's the whole point of it is that there is no point other than you make the point. What point would you make if you could make the point? What's the point of life? To enjoy it is the only answer that I can come up with.
Yep.
To enjoy being alive. Because other than that, what's the point to being alive?
And at Dhammarato, I really appreciate it. And, I was saying all these things to myself before I got on the call tonight. But you reinforced that inner confidence that I had. I just wanted to bring it up because, yeah, I was creating problems, but also you wouldn't sway me from investigating this further, like medically, right? Like at least I could get some brain scans. At least I could kind of talk about what's going on and see what a doctor might have to say about it. No?
Yes, but be careful with that because there's a whole lot of people out there going from one brain scan to another thinking that it'll eventually find something wrong that they can blame it on.
Right. Right. For sure.
That we're looking for a problem that, like a pill that you can take or a particular food to avoid or something like that.
Yeah.
In order for you to speak better. But guess what? Nobody really cares. Here's an example of what I mean by that. Imagine that, in fact, you did die, that you were dead.
Yes.
You have your funeral, and a lot of people may come. Maybe your boss, in fact, makes, oh, well, I had something to come up and I couldn't make Alex's funeral. The really articulate guy, he didn't even manage to come to your funeral. 6 months after you're dead, people don't think about you much anymore. A year after you're dead, how about 50 years after you're dead? My dad died more than 50 years ago, and I don't think much about him. In fact, the only time that I thought about him this week is when I'm talking to the students about something or another, and this is an example. He's been dead 50 years, and nobody gives a thought about him. Almost everybody that my dad ever knew has already been dead. The only one that I know of who's still alive, who ever knew my dad, was me, and I don't give him a second thought. Okay, so now let's go 200 years. Nobody's going to remember. Now the next one, how about Thich Nhat Hanh? He's what, 7,000, 5,000 years old, but we don't think of it. We don't know anything about Thich Nhat Hanh. All we know is the sarcophagus and all the equipment that he was buried with. And that's what we're interested in, was his toys, but we don't have a clue about him. So this is what I'm getting at, is that we all really overly care about what other people think about us, and nobody's thinking about us. We are really overly concerned about what people's opinions of ourselves are, and guess what? They're doing exactly the same thing. And nobody cares about each other because everybody's caring about themselves. Well, if that's the case, that generally then throws a monkey wrench in that whole idea of what's the meaning of life. What is the meaning?
I wanted to.
Yes, Corey, go ahead.
I wanted to throw something out there because it brought something to mind, and it's about the practice. So there was a point when I was looking into, like philosophy and epistemology and, the meaning of things. And at some point I came to that nihilism kind of understanding. And nihilism is like the modern philosophy version of sunyata, of like emptiness, like no inherent meaning.
Nothing.
Not exactly, but it's kind of similar, right? So anyways, whenever I began to learn about that kind of no deeper meaning thing, or that it's about meaning not being objective, like essentially meaning is subjective, which isn't to say that like there's no meaning. It's just it's subjective meaning. It's not objective. But if you're the subject, it's objective to you. But anyways, whenever I got to that point, the first thing I really cared about was just not asking what's wrong anymore. So that was like the first level for me of like things going right with practice and like everything really starting to click. And that was kind of like the first level of heaven for me, I guess, where I was like, suddenly I wasn't really making things worse by examining all the bad things. And I could figure out how to stop asking questions, because questions agitate your mind. They just, mess you up. So anyways, for me, that was like the first step of really things turning up, is like, but at that point I wasn't really doing the wholesome thinking, and I wasn't really making it positive. I was just not making it negative anymore. So anyways, that was like the first thing for me about when my first, what is the meaning? Or the first thing I wanted to was to stop asking that question. And, with the teachings of Buddhism and things like that, eventually I was able to stop asking it. And whenever you stop asking about the hidden meaning, you start to just appreciate life, and it kind of makes you feel better. So anyways, that was a really good point for me. And I just wanted to throw that out there that, other people, you might not go straight into like wholesome thinking and like making everything happy. You might just first start out at not making life any harder on yourself. And, asking what is the deeper meaning is a real good way to do that. It's not that people we really do it. It's like it happens naturally. But anyways, yeah, I'm getting better at making things positive, so very good at not making things worse on myself. But you also have to build that other skill of like consciously being wholesome and, choosing to be happy. Because yeah, like you can create your own meaning and do your own thing, but you have to actually put in effort to it. And it's like, to make yourself happy, you have to make yourself happy. I guess you got to put in a little effort.
Right. It's a skill to be developed. You have
Wow!
to practice.
Congratulations, Corey.
Yes.
Congratulations.
That's a good point, Alex. Yes. Congratulations, Corey, that you're making some progress there.
Very cool.
You're coming out
Yeah,
of it.
I think I've been
Yeah.
around for like a year or maybe quite a few months. And I definitely have to credit Dhammarato with the thinking aspect and the wholesome thoughts, because like he's really the person who kind of showed me and really got me to work with, what to do. Because before this, I was really just at a point of like not asking questions anymore. And for me, that was kind of good enough. But whenever you don't make life harder on yourself, you just kind of run into this neutral ground a lot, and you get kind of like dullness and then restlessness. And it's just, you're not really like happy and having a good time. You're just not having a bad time. And so anyways, I'm really thankful that suddenly I joined a community and they're like, oh, well, it's good that you're not feeling bad, but try making yourself feel good. That'll feel really good. And so luckily they gave me some skills and I've been doing that.
Okay, Corey, you mentioned something a while back, and that was the hidden meaning. That, in fact, that's a very good point. Going back to the point about Flip Wilson, is what you see is what you get. There is nothing hidden.
Mm-hmm.
What there is instead is something mental. That all the hidden stuff is actually just mental stuff, which means that it doesn't exist except in the mind. It's an invention. It's a conception. We conceptualize the world that we live in, and the real teaching is to come back into the real world. Stop looking for the hidden meaning, because the real meaning doesn't really exist. It's not hidden. The real meaning of life is not hidden. It just doesn't exist until you make it. And so it's a two-step operation. First off, or actually with Corey, 3 steps. The first step is to stop being hard on yourself.
Gratitude, like a Dhammarato gratitude shower. What's that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I was saying this is just a big Dhammarato gratitude shower. Because
oh, perfect.
I wanted to say as well, Corey, I really relate to you, man. It was actually the same way for me. I either all in wholesome, or I was like in the ditch, like screw that, I'm not being wholesome. I was never in between. And the in between is noticing the unwholesome that's already there and cutting it off, cutting it out, noticing it, and not just noticing it, but being eager to see it, seeing the unwholesome within yourself with delight, like you're about to have a delicious dessert. It's so weird, it's so strange, but it works. And I've been doing it for the past 3 weeks, and yesterday was the first day where I can say there was like an experiential, like a direct, and all day today and right now, a directly experiential difference in my being. And it's not coming from thinking about being or reading about being. It's just excavating the unwholesome from within your experience and making way for the wholesome. And also the biggest part has been that there's no rules to this, really. Like I've imagined rules. Like I'll say I'm going to be happy, but
Yeah.
the happiness that I want to feel isn't going to happen for about 5 minutes. But that's just a
Oh.
rule, or isn't going to happen for about a few more statements of I can be happy now. But it can happen right now. Who's to say it can't? It's been a rule this whole time. These unconscious habits that I didn't even know were there, I'm only seeing now because I started to cut off the unwholesome. So thank you so much, Dhammarato, and Corey as well. I'm blown
sure.
away.
I'm really pleased to hear you. That's great. So, getting back to what Nick, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask both Alex and Corey, could you like explain what you mean by wholesome and unwholesome, like in your personal experience of like I guess I was just kind of
Yeah.
confused by what you meant.
Yeah. I'd love, or Corey, if you want to talk about it, feel free.
Sure. Well, I feel like I'm definitely more of a beginner, or that I like to be more neutral. I just like don't really lay on very much of it, of like the wholesomeness. I just like that was my thing for a long time, is I want to try and be natural and real. And I don't know, for some reason, I just have a resistance to making myself happier. And so like for me, I've been like progressing slower with it, but like I said in the first beginning, as long as I wasn't making myself worse, like that was good enough. And now it's kind of like you just slowly build into like the level of wholesome that you want and that you like, and it's like building a muscle or a strength. Like
Mhm.
you become more able to handle a higher level of happiness. Um, like your central nervous system like mediates your feeling in your body. It also mediates your like learning and a lot of memory stuff. And anyways, like my experience is like if you get wholesome enough, you'll begin to kind of like your core will shake, and I just don't like that feeling to be like too happy. And so I resisted it at first, and now I'm kind of learning that that's just like an effect similar to like working out and your muscles getting tired. Like when you work out
Yeah.
your inner systems, like it feels a certain way. So yeah, like I just get wholesome until I feel maybe too wholesome or overwhelmed, and then I'm kind of like stop and just enjoy things. So it's kind of like there's a throttle to it. You can find the speed that you want, and then like dial it up or dial it down, and you build up a strength over time.
Corey, that's really good. I think that you've given us a new phrase or a new
Yeah.
way of looking, a new concept, and that is happiness muscle.
Yeah,
To
it really is.
to make that happiness muscle stronger. Now,
Yeah,
one of the
I
points
learned a
that
lot about the central nervous system when I was researching anxiety, and meditation is like the antidote to anxiety. And so, if anxiety disorder and I don't know about depression, but I know for sure my anxiety disorders were a disorder of my central nervous system, and the meditation training is like the opposite of that. It's healing it and building it stronger. And so that's kind of how I, know all that stuff, and that's what I'm talking about.
Mhm. So you've got a happiness muscle that you're developing there. Now, here's something that we can talk about from that perspective, and that is that we often resist being happy because of circumstances that happened when we were a kid. Like the uncle will come into the room and says, "What are you so happy about?" In other words, we lose permission for being happy. We also think that if I am really happy, that something bad's going to happen. We also have the idea that, oh, well, I'll have to put up with this level of happiness because I can't get any more than this. So I've gotten three things there. They can come from the position of power or potency. Can I actually be happy? This is an attitude that we can develop. I can be happy. We keep thinking about it from that person and talk about it and say, okay, I do have the ability. The Buddha actually talks about this in the sense of the attitude that we have is that we can do this. We can be happy. We do have the power. We have that ability. So the second one then is the permission. We have to give ourselves permission because we have been told all of our lives what our boundaries are. Oh, you can't cross into that boundary. You don't have what it takes. You don't have permission from the authority. We don't have uh, we don't have it, and we're not supposed to get it. So when we get permission, then it's okay. In other words, what you need is you need a hall pass or a happiness pass. It's okay for you to be happy because we've been told in our society you can't be happy until you get the work done. You have to eat your broccoli before you can have that dessert. And the answer is no, I can have the dessert and the hell with your broccoli.
Dhammarato, can I add something?
Okay, well, let me add the third point. And that is,
Oh yeah,
that
I want to hear it.
the third point then is protection. In other words, if we are happy, completely happy as we want to be, and full of happiness, then we're going to get punished for it. Something bad's going to happen. You're going to get caught, right? And so when we have the three P's of the power that I can get this happiness, the permission that yes, I can get it. I've got a hall pass for happiness. And the number three is that you can get away with being happy. You can do this. You're not going to be punished for being happy. When you have those three things, that's it. You've got it. And so you can then practice it and build it up as a skill. Now, back to one of the things that Nick had asked was basically, well, what is wholesome? The answer to
Yes.
that is that wholesome then is a skill to be developed, and that the part of the development is going through these three things that we just talked about. Do you have the power to do it? Do you have the permission to do it? And do you have the protection? And so this is something that we can start to investigate. But in the beginning, we can think about it, well, any thought that's of the past, something happened a long time ago, that's more than likely going to be unwholesome because we remember things in order to fix them. Also, thoughts about the future and thoughts about someplace else. So, thinking about Chicago, thinking about Washington, D.C., when people think about Washington, D.C., they automatically start to feel bad. And so the answer to that is, well, let's not think about Washington, D.C. That's not part of my vocabulary. That my vocabulary exists at the boundaries of my senses. So my world is only about 50 meters, maybe 100 meters. For some of you, it's only about 5 meters right now. The room that we're in, that's our whole universe. Everything is there. But when we think about someplace else, that's just merely conceptualizations. So that, Nick, is a way of starting to recognize what is wholesome. Right here, right now is wholesome. Over there, back then, way off in the yonder is not necessarily so wholesome. So this is a good way to start looking at it. Is just that if I can remember to be in this breath right here, right now, then that's probably wholesome. To be
Yeah, and in my direct experience, the the unwholesome, Nick, is like something as simple as I don't like this, or I don't want to do this. That's a big one. I don't want to do this right now. I don't want to do this. I wake up sometimes and I notice it's right there. Right when I wake up, it's fuck this. Isn't it? Isn't that hilarious? I mean, I just noticed it this week, and I was like, oh my gosh, I never even knew that I fucking said that. I never even knew that. And so when I see these things now, it's very easy to just be like overjoyed by it. It's like, oh wow, there's another one. That's awesome. And then you're like, I can do this. Everything's fine. Everything's all right. And these words, though, they don't really take weight unless you give yourself that permission for them to take that weight. Like, to really understand what it means when you say everything is fine for yourself. What does that mean for yourself? Like, if you could feel any way you want to feel right now, how would you want to feel? Or are there any improvements you'd like to make to how you currently feel? And then make those improvements and let it just experiment. You might smile, you might jump up and down, you might do some weird shit, but it doesn't matter. Like, if it gets you into a wholesome condition, trust it, because it's literally your way through, and it becomes more comfortable as you do it. I used to be like, everything is fine. What? I don't even, this doesn't do anything for me. But what I noticed is the more and more I thought about how I'd want to feel, if I could feel any way I wanted to feel, that's been the biggest one, man. Are there any changes to how I'd like to feel right now? Yeah. Okay. All right. And then make the changes. And it's like, you can feel your body's physiochemistry changing as you do this. So anyway, don't want to be too verbose about it, but yeah, man.
Alex,
wholesome.
right. Alex, you said something.
Yeah.
Like when you wake up in the morning, you have that thought of, oh, I don't want to do this. Or fuck this shit,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, I don't want to do this.
I don't want to do this, okay? Now, that's clearly and obviously unwholesome. But we can make a very, very slight little change to it, and it becomes wholesome. And what is that slight little change is, instead of saying, I don't want to do this, we can have the permission of, oh, well, I don't have to do this right now. I get a reprieve. I don't have to do it right now. Everything is already okay. I don't have to do that right now. And we can do that about getting up in the morning. We can do about it thinking about writing an email to the boss or calling some client or anything like that. Instead of saying, I don't want to do this, we can have the thing of, oh, well, I can wait. Let me wait until I'm in a really good state. I'll spend my time getting myself into a really good state, and then I'll do it happily.
Right.
We talked
What's
about
a really
this.
good way to look at it is you procrastinate the problem. You don't like to procrastinate certain things, but if you ever have a chance to procrastinate a problem, it feels really good. It's like a blend of everything that you like. And the reason I trust myself to do that is because, like, I procrastinate enough that I know I procrastinate when it's not a problem. When essentially I'm trying to talk myself into it being a problem, so I'll address it early. So I procrastinate doing that. I procrastinate my bad behavior, and then what I do that because I know that when the there's a certain kind of pressure that I'll feel when the problem becomes real, and so I know that I can't address it. It's not me trying to get myself into a problem. I can feel when the problem is real. So you can procrastinate worry, and you can procrastinate until the problem is real, and then you really deal with it. And I don't know, like, I feel like that's a better way to go about it.
That's an important point, Corey. You just made it, okay? Let's talk about procrastination for just a second. And that is that often we procrastinate and feel bad. Supposed to procrastinate. Go get her done. Get the job done. That's part of our culture, you know. But another way of looking at procrastination is that we're postponing it because we're not sure. We're not ready. Another way that we would postpone things and procrastinate is because we know if we do it, we'll feel bad doing it. How do we know we'll feel bad doing it? It's because we feel bad just thinking about it. Gosh, doing it, and I'm going to be really miserable. And the reality is that that's just more or less the object, that the underlying current is the current of feeling, and that's what we really need to work with. And so we can actually procrastinate in a wholesome, healthy way, and we can procrastinate in a miserable way. If that's true, then what's the problem with procrastination? It depends upon the situation. That in fact, a whole lot of stuff needs to be procrastinated. A whole lot of bad behavior needs to be procrastinated, right? Like killing that ugly uncle that I don't like. It's better to procrastinate that. Don't do it. So procrastination for unwholesome stuff is actually good. Don't do it. But the stuff that needs to be done, which is the point that you're making, Corey, is that if it needs to be done, then now we have a choice. I've got to do it. Am I going to do it and hate it, or am I going to do it and enjoy it? But if it's got to be done, we still have a choice about how we feel about it. If I know that it needs to be done, then why can't I be happy doing it, knowing that I'm doing what needs to be done? Why do I have to do what needs to be done and hate it? So it really still back to the attitude. It's not about procrastination, that in fact, someone who is really wise is really, really profoundly, excellently, highly skilled at procrastination. Achan Po is really, really skilled at procrastination. He has been the abbot of Wat Suan Mok since 1969. He's been abbot of that place for 50 years on top of the 20 years that it took him to be a monk, on top of the 20 years of that, and that puts him into his 90s. But he's been the abbot of the place now for 50 years. How can that be when he doesn't hardly ever do anything? He doesn't do anything. That in fact, when somebody, and I've seen this happen, people will come, maybe lay people, they'll come and they'll talk about a family problem, or more than likely they'll come and talk to him about all the problems at the Wat. Achan Po, you're the abbot of this Wat. Here's this, that, and the other thing. And he'll listen and he won't do anything. Why? Because he knows that those people who are complaining will go and complain to somebody else too, because they probably know Achan Po's not going to do anything. And those people then haven't learned his secret, and they'll go fix the problem. Achan Po doesn't have to fix any problems because he knows the problems are going to get fixed without him. And so he is actually the world-class procrastinator. He does nothing, and yet so much stuff happens around him. And so this is a way of start looking at your whole life, is that, hey, go ahead and procrastinate. Only do the things that you want to do when you feel good about it. But sometimes it's actually required that you've got to feel good about this and do it. This is necessary. You see that on YouTube from time to time, that somebody will pick a child up out of the road just before they get run over. Okay, this is the kind of behavior that we really think is good. Let's do it. There's 10,000 things that need to be done. Let's do them all happily. But if we don't feel happy, then procrastinate until you do feel happy. But in fact, use that time of the waiting to get yourself into a good mood so that you can do what you want to do already happily. So yeah, I'm really good at procrastination. It's a skill to be developed. And so Nick and Alex and Corey, thank you guys so much. This has been a really good talk. I really like it when the guys get in and basically what happens is that when we talk about this kind of stuff, Alex, when you talk to us about it, it reinforces it. It takes it deeper in so that you really, really know that you've got it, because you're getting feedback from others as well as being able to make it real. It's no longer a thought. You vocalize
Yeah,
it.
that's a really good point.
And so this is
Yeah.
one of the things that I do is that I highly recommend students to share. I highly recommend students share, because that makes your experiences more real, and it builds the Sangha. It builds friendship.
And in that
See?
spirit, thank you so much for
What did
sharing
you-
with us today, my friends.
Today has been really great. Thank you.
So wonderful.
Does anybody have any final things to say? We've been at it for an hour and a half now. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, I was just wondering, Nick, when did you meet Dhammarato? Was it recent?
Yeah, I've only started coming in the past like month.
Last month. Okay, cool, man. Well, welcome to the Sangha.
Thanks.
Yeah, and Zachary, you've been silent, but I've been watching you pet your cat.
Yeah, I got a little brushing there for a second. He wandered off to bed.
Oh, Zachary. Okay, nice to meet you, Zachary. When did you meet Dhammarato? How long
Good
ago
day.
for you?
I'm Other Alex's brother, so what was that, last month, I think?
I think that's correct.
Us too. Okay.
Well, guys, it's been really great. Thank you so
Well,
much.
let us know. Yes, yeah. Thank you so much for coming. And if y'all listen, we're all here to support each other, right? Like I pop in Alex's DMs. We talk to each other sometimes. We're all here to support each other. So, Nick and Zach, I think it was. If you want any support or anything, my line's open. You just message me on Skype. I'm happy to get on a call whenever.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Thank you,
Lorette.
Me too.
friends.
Available if you guys want to talk. Have a good one.
See you all very soon.
Thanks, guys.
Take
Yeah.
care.
Okay.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys. Thank you.